Welcome to Just Asia, AHRC TV's weekly human rights program. These are the headlines. 5 women killed in honor killings during last 15 days in Pakistan. The Punisher Duterte wins Philippines presidential election. Thailand's moment of shame at Human Rights Council. Indonesian residents continue to face forced evictions. Bangladesh crisis requires international support. Urgent appeals from Pakistan, Sri Lanka, India, and Indonesia. Welcome to AHRC TV's Just Asia. I am Julia Roblondo. Beginning with Pakistan, 3 cases of honor killings have been reported from the country over the last 15 days, killing 5 women, including 2 girls. In the latest case, 3 young women in one family were shot dead by male relatives who suspected them of having illicit relations with other men, police in eastern Pakistan said on Wednesday. In a country where women are persecuted for making their own marriage choices, an illegal jirga in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa province decided that a girl who helped her friend elope should also be punished, and she was hence burned alive on April 29th. This would apparently set an example for other girls and stop love marriages in the area. In another honor killing in the capital city of Karachi, a brother brutally stabbed his teenage sister for talking on a mobile phone. He later left her bleeding on the streets as bystanders watched the girl die a slow, painful death. Such acts are the result of a typical mindset that women must be killed for disobeying men and besmirching their honor. The year 2015 saw more than 7,010 cases of violence against women reported. This figure is far from complete, however, as many cases go unreported. Pakistan's performance in terms of the Gender Inequality Index is one of the worst in the world. With the country's justice system dominated by corruption and patriarchy, there is no redress for victims. Next, the presidential elections in the Philippines show the unofficial victory of anti-crime candidate Rodrigo Digong Duterte, mayor of the southern town of Davao. His campaign has promised to end crime, corruption, and poverty in the Philippines, as well as rewrite the country's constitution. According to election officials, the country saw a record-breaking 81% voter turnout, with Mr. Duterte having more than 14.8 million votes, while his closest rival had 8.6 million votes. Called the Punisher, there are fears that Mr. Duterte's presidency will lead the Philippines back to dictatorship and grave human rights violation. Just Asia speaks to PhD candidate Danilo Reyes, City University of Hong Kong, for his views.
Philippine people acknowledge that he is the popular candidate and popular elected president-elect of the Philippines. There had been concerns about human rights issues before Mayor and would-be President Rodrigo Duterte joined the presidential race, and during the campaign period and also after the election period. And some of those concerns involves his open disregard about due process, open disregard about right to life when it comes to rights of individuals involved in syndicated criminals, illegal drugs, and corruption. So that is one of his strong position during the presidential campaign. And it explains also the frustrations of the Filipino people to really address criminality in Philippines for many years, and abuse also by politicians, and exploitation also of their power, enriching themselves. And for a few years there have been politicians who are in jail on trial for plunder and corruption, including the former president and the current senator. So his rise to power, despite concerns about human rights, expressed the frustrations by Filipino people about the lack of accountability in Philippines. So I think the challenge now, given the popularity of Rodrigo Duterte and the popular mandate that he has, the challenge not only for human rights activists but also for Filipino people to ensure that whoever is in power, there has to be an institution that can control abuse of power, regardless of whether it's on human rights or other violations by state and public officials. It means the discourse on human rights must shift to discourse about the protection or institutional protection of human rights, not by who is in power, but regardless of who is in power.
Next, Thailand's second Universal Periodic Review cycle took place on Wednesday, May 11th, where the Thai government's compliance with its human rights obligations was reviewed by the UN Human Rights Council. Earlier on February 12th, the Thai government had submitted a report to the Human Rights Council, saying it attaches utmost importance to the promotion and protection of human rights of all people. However, the military junta has severely repressed fundamental rights with impunity and disregarded its international human rights obligations. As a key mandate on the UN Human Rights Council, the UPR is a unique human rights mechanism and an important political process for advancing the realization of human rights on the ground. Several countries submitted questions ahead of Thailand's human rights review regarding the number of civilians that have been tried in military courts since 22 May 2014, the number of persons sentenced, charged, or arrested for the lèse majesté crimes, and military camps or to have received a house visit by the military. In response, the Thai delegation said nothing to dispel fears of a continuing crisis. Rights group argued that the Thai government failed to show any real commitment to reversing its abusive rights practices or protecting fundamental freedoms.
Germany warmly welcomes the delegation of Thailand to the UPR. Germany is deeply concerned about restrictions of the rights to freedom of expression, association and assembly. We offer the following recommendations. 1. End the trial of civilians in military courts and ensure that all civilians are tried before civilian courts and are granted the right to fair trial and to bail. 2. Ensure that the right of freedom of opinion is respected, including by reviewing Article 112 of the Penal Code. Ensure a safe environment that promotes the rights of all people to freely associate and assemble without hindrances. 3. Ratify the 1951 Convention relating to the status of refugees and implement legislation providing asylum seekers and refugees with legal status in line with international standards, especially abiding the principle of non-refoulement. 4. Establish an official moratorium on executions. Sign and ratify the second optional protocol to the ICCPR and aim to abolish the death penalty. Thank you, Mr. President.
Mr. President, my delegation welcomes the delegation of Thailand and expresses its appreciation for the national report. While recognizing that some effort have been made, my delegation is concerned about the situation of fundamental freedoms and human rights defenders in the country. In line with the recommendation made by special procedures, my delegation would like to make the following 3 recommendations in line with its obligations under the ICCPR. First, amend Article 112 of Thailand's Criminal Code to remove prison terms for offences stemming from the legitimate exercise of the right to freedom of opinion and expression and ensure that the prohibited acts are unambiguous and that sanctions are proportionate to the act committed. Second, repeal NCPO Order 3/2015 and ensure that all civilians are tried before civilian court and granted the right to fair trial in line with Thailand's obligation as a state party to ICCPR. Third, immediately ratify the Convention on Enforced Disappearances. I thank you, Mr. President.
In Indonesia, housing rights continue to be problematic with no serious resolutions by the government. This is particularly troubling for elderly and retired persons whose houses are claimed by state bodies and they are forcibly evicted without legal process. Countless cases of forced eviction and land grabbing conducted by an army and other state apparatus on behalf of state-owned land are reported by the APRN. In the last 5 years, the APRN has conducted various advocacy efforts to stop such illegal evictions and claims, including lobbying various government bodies as well as protesting in front of the presidential palace. Despite this, evictions continue. Apart from making some promises and holding dialogues, the government has done nothing else to resolve this issue. To learn more, Just Asia speaks to Donnie Sonorio, chairperson of the Residents Alliance of the Housing State.
Kondisi mengenai pengosongan perumahan negara, khususnya di lingkungan TNI, sebetulnya karena tidak ditegakkannya peraturan perundang-undangan yang berlaku. Itu yang paling mendasar. Lalu masalah yang timbul yang tidak diperhatikan oleh pemerintah adalah rata-rata asal-usul atau sejarah perumahan yang dihuni oleh para purnawirawan saat ini sebetulnya bukan aset TNI atau aset negara. Mereka membangun rumah pada saat 40 tahun yang lalu itu menggunakan fasilitas pemotongan gaji atau pesangon dari hotel atau mengumpulkan uang lembur para prajurit. Itu yang mereka lakukan. Nah, sekarang pihak TNI tidak mau memahami asal-usul perumahan yang saat ini dihuni oleh para purnawirawan. Nah, karena mereka tidak mau mengetahui asal-usulnya, jadi mereka mengklaim semua milik negara sebagai aset negara. Hal lain adalah yang sedang kita soroti saat ini sebetulnya pengerahan pasukan untuk pengosongan perumahan-perumahan di lingkungan TNI maupun di lingkungan perumahan umum yang akhir-akhir ini terjadi itu melanggar Undang-Undang Nomor 34 Tahun 2004 tentang tugas pokok TNI. Ini juga perlu kita soroti. TNI tidak menjadi negara dalam menertibkan masalah perumahan-perumahan yang dihuni oleh purnawirawan.
Bangladesh's human rights situation is getting worse daily, while its political crisis due to an authoritarian regime is deepening. The Asian Human Rights Commission's Director for Policy and Program, Basil Fernando, has urged the international community to come to a common understanding of the dangers facing the entire people in their countries. It is with a common understanding that the perspective can be developed to find ways to deal with the kind of crisis that is arising in Bangladesh. Fernando said at an international solidarity conference on Bangladesh held last week on Thailand.
The UN Rapporteur for Independence of Judges and Lawyers should make an assessment of how the judiciary itself feels about the independence in Bangladesh. When the Chief Justice himself has publicly spoken out and said that the executive is bent on completely taking away the judicial function, that is a warning that of highest nature. It is a kind of warning that it is not permissible to be ignored. The observers of the judicial scene over a long period also find that the judiciary itself connived with the political forces to undermine the judicial institutions. For whatever reason, such compromises were made. Now the Chief Justice himself is forced to admit that there is a real threat to the judicial function not only being ignored but being erased in Bangladesh. Such is the situation, and it requires a study and understanding and development of a strategy of how to deal with it. If such a strategy is developed in terms of Bangladesh, it would also help many other countries, those judiciaries are under serious threat. Some of which are facing very serious dangers of peril. I hope this meeting will not be one more meeting, but that we could make some strong statements and of our what we expect both from the international community and also from political authorities, judicial authorities, in order to face enormously serious problem that the society as a whole is facing in Bangladesh. You have our solidarity. We hope we will march forward together.
Finally, the Urgent Appeals Weekly features 4 stories from Pakistan, Sri Lanka, India, and Indonesia. In Pakistan, a family from the federally administered tribal area were forced to migrate from their ancestral home due to a brutal tribal custom of gag, whereby any man can forcibly demand or claim the hand of a woman without her or her parents' will or consent. In Sri Lanka, police officers attached to the Nawalapitiya police have illegally arrested and severely tortured Ms. M.K. Malani, a resident of Dolosbagi Estate, and later produced her before the Nawalapitiya magistrate. She was detained when she tried to lodge a complaint at the Nawalapitiya police station regarding the death of her husband. She was hung from the ceiling in full view of her child and forced to admit to killing her own husband. In Manipur, India, 2 persons have been killed and others injured due to a police firing at a public protest in Tawag in Arunachal Pradesh. The public protest was organized to demand the release of activist Lobsang Gyatso, who has been protesting hydropower projects in Tawag. Lastly, in Indonesia's Yogyakarta province, police along with vigilante groups forcibly dispersed the gathering and movie screening to commemorate World Press Freedom Day. That is all for this episode of Just Asia. For more on these and other issues, please visit www.humanrights.asia or www.alrc.asia/justasia. Thank you for watching and see you next week.